my Suikoden collection. Yeah, I'm so proud to own it. Every single one of them, with the exception of Tear Cries. What, you think you notice something different in here? Yeah, I mean, that's because, well, I don't like to show my original Suikoden copy. Suikoden 2 copy, yeah, that's right. I don't like to show it because, well, I have a sealed copy of it with an autograph from Miki Higashino and Murayama, of course. Yep, 2 autographs. So if I showed it, I would just be being pretentious and you will be so envious of me, and I don't want to hurt your feelings. That's why whenever I show my collection or something, I just show my pirated copy of it, because it's a very expensive game and the copy I own is probably worth $1,000. You understand, right? What? Okay, I admit it! I don't have Suikoden 2! I don't own it! Okay, I have a pirate copy of Suikoden 2. This is my copy of Suikoden 2, yeah. And I'm proud to have it. Okay, I'm not proud. I'm not proud, okay? I'm sorry. I'm sorry, this is my copy. I'm sorry, I'm poor. Get out of my head! The first Suikoden was released at the end of 1995 and was never intended to be a series. It wasn't after the initial success it had in Japan and partially in the entire world that the team, under the command of Yoshitaka Murayama, decided to make a second game. Suikoden was also released for Microsoft Windows and the Sega Saturn in 1998, but neither version made it out of Japan. We all know that the series is loosely based on the classic Chinese novel Water Margin, also translated as 1,000 other names, and it's one of the 4 classic Chinese novels allegedly from the 14th century, talking about 108 outlaws that want to create an army. However, Murayama has said that the games are not based on the novel, but rather he and his team took the main idea from it, as in being influenced by it. Going back to Suikoden, it was a successful RPG simply because it was just so different from your everyday RPGs back in the mid-90s, including the building of an army, the strategy battles, and the duels. So many great ideas this game turned out to include that the interest from the general public suddenly went on a higher demand for a much better game. I say this because the first Suikoden was just too short and not as complete as other RPGs, according to critics. So, when Konami heard about all of this, they immediately asked Murayama for a sequel. But back then, Final Fantasy VII was coming out, so how was Konami going to compete with this? With a much better game, of course. This, as we all know, never happened. Final Fantasy VII nailed the world and Suikoden approached the oblivion. Suikoden 2 was released 3 years later after the first Suikoden in December 1998. Story-wise, it was 3 years after the events of the first Suikoden, but with different characters, different plot, and in a new part of the world. It's a cult classic nowadays, and it is considered by many as one of the best JRPGs ever made, but back in 1999, when it was released in North America and 2000 in Europe, even though being successful, other RPGs completely overshadowed it, and the initial sales were considerably dropped, which turned this excellent title into a limited print run. This is the reason why this game is one of the most expensive RPGs out there as of today. Between 1999 and 2001, a new Suikoden team and Konami released 2 visual novels that will be a spin-off of Suikoden 2. They were called Suikogaiden. 2 volumes were made for the PS1, but none was released outside Japan. Time went on, but Konami didn't give up, so in 2002, the third Suikoden came out for the PS2. Instead of having a silent protagonist this time, the game was divided into 4 protagonists, 3 main characters with names and personalities, and 1 that was entirely optional. It was a commercial success and met with very strong positive feedback from critics in some parts of the world. I say some parts because this game, however successful, was only released in Japan and North America. Yup, not in Europe. And this was only the tip of the iceberg as to why the series met its downfall several years later. It turns out that Konami didn't want to release the game in Europe because of an exceedingly stupid reason. Yeah, they said that all PAL games had to be fully translated to the respective languages and that only releasing the game in English was not an option. Petitions to change this preposterous decision were made, but to no avail. This is the turning point of the series. Suikoden 3 was the last Suikoden made by Murayama and his team, which back then included Miki Higashino on the music department. Nevertheless, she left on maternity leave, yep, that's all we know, having left us with music for Suikoden 1 and 2 and Suikogaiden 1 and 2. But Suikoden 3's music, however, was composed mainly by Michiru Yamane, but with the help of Keiko Fukami, who had previously worked with Higashino as well. Anyways, the point is that Murayama left, only stating that his 10-year contract with Konami, which had started back in 1993, had officially ended. No other explanations were given and his name was taken out from the credits of Suikoden 3. We all know what happens when the author of a series leaves the games. Franchises tend to fail or go into some serious, outrageous changes that always tear fan bases apart. So since Suikoden 3 had been successful, Konami didn't waste any time publishing Suikoden 4, also for the PS2, but now made by the fusion of the remnants between the original Suikoden team and the Suikogaiden team. It was released in 2004 in Japan and the following year now in both Europe and North America. This game was now directed by Masayuki Saruta and written by the artist of the first Suikoden, Junko Kawano. She had never worked on any other Suikoden game before other than the first one, and now she was in charge? In any case, we all know what happened. Suikoden 4 was a huge failure outside Japan. It was met with mixed reviews at first, later becoming negative for the most part, but not inside Japan, since the game was well received there, so well as a matter of fact that it spawned a spin-off called Suikoden Tactics, which Kawano also made, also for the PS2. But now, as the name implies, this was a strategy RPG. This happened the following year in 2005, and it wasn't very well received by, well, anyone. It gained slightly favorable reviews in Japan, but average ones from the rest of the world. It's a good game in my opinion, but it's nothing beyond a decent spin-off. In any case, those two games were still part of the Suikoden universe, still of the same lore, but becoming the absolute prequel to the entire series, taking place 150 years before the first Suikoden. Wow! So now what? Konami realized Junko just wasn't good enough, that Murayama leaving had been a mistake, and that the series was meeting its downfall. So what did they do? Yep, they asked for help. To Hudson Soft. So in 2006, with Hudson's help, the world finally met Suikoden 5. The same team worked on the game, but now new people were leading it, having recruited again Miki Higashino for cooperation with the music. So we all know this was a great game, right? In my opinion, it's the best Suikoden ever made, taking place 6 years before the first Suikoden, even though it wasn't made by Murayama. But the surprise factor is here that, believe it or not, the game was a complete and absolute failure when it first came out. Yeah, everybody was already disappointed by three extremely important things. Murayama was gone, Suikoden 4 and Tactics had not been well received, and 5 had taken too much time into development. It had even started before Suikoden 4 and was going to be a spin-off. Thankfully, it became what we now know and love, but in 2006, the franchise, unfortunately, and to the surprise of everybody else, was drowning in the abyss. Konami's last attempt to release something outside Japan, another spin-off. It came out in 2008, 1 year later in Europe and North America. Technically, it was still made by the same people, but now switching roles and ending up once again with a huge mess of new names popping up in its credits. Hudson Soft was also not involved in this game. So, a new Suikoden game for a console that wasn't from Sony. It was well received, sure, but people knew it from Suikoden Tactics that this was yet another spin-off. so they were more forgiving, enjoying the game, wondering why the hell this was released for the Nintendo DS and not the PSP, etc. Fans were patiently waiting for Suikoden 6. Suikoden, the woven web of a century, was released in 2012. People wanted a Suikoden for the PSP, a comeback to Sony consoles. Okay, here you go. But guess what? Only in Japan. Yeah. Screw you, fans around the world. Keep waiting forever for Suikoden 6 and shove this Japanese title up your ass. It was made by the same team as before, again with different roles assigned to some of them, and why do I even bother? I don't even care if this game was successful or not, because it's 2018 and we still don't have a Suikoden 6. And it did fail, actually. In conclusion, my favorite JRPG franchise of all time is probably never going to come back. We didn't get this either, yeah, obviously. Or this in 2001 for the Game Boy Advance. I mean, there are even more spin-offs than main titles out there. Seriously! Is this Konami's fault? Considering all the lame-ass decisions they've been making for the past few years, it wouldn't surprise me. But the thing is, changing personnel over the years, departure of key figures of the franchise, risky attempts to create something new and failing, too many spin-offs. I think that pretty much sums up what happened to the team, including disputes amongst them and then disbandment. Regardless, it is still one of the greatest JRPG franchises of all time, my personal favorite, and a beloved series that has left us with no real explanations. In other words, we can only speculate on what the hell happened to Suikoden. So what do you think? Will we ever get a new Suikoden? By a new team? By a different company? By Murayama himself if he decides to miraculously come back? Who knows? All we have to do is hope. Don't lose hope. Maybe, just maybe, it will happen one day. I found an interview with Murayama himself from 2 years ago on the internet. I'm gonna leave the link in the description below in case you wanna go and watch it. And it's pretty interesting, so take a look if you want to. Thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and share this video with your friends. See you next time.